A badge is a shield, but for some it becomes a weapon. In the sleepy, affluent jurisdiction of Oak Creek, two officers thought they had snagged another easy target. A well-dressed black man in a luxury sedan they assumed was stolen. They mocked him. They ignored his calm warnings. They laughed when he requested a phone call to Washington, D.C. They didn't know that the man in handcuffs wasn't a criminal. He was Marcus T. Langford, the newly appointed director of the FBI, conducting a covert field test of local corruption. By the time the laughter stopped, it was too late. This is the story of how arrogance met absolute power. Rain slicked the asphalt of the interstate, turning the highway into a ribbon of reflected neon and shadow. It was late at night. Marcus T. Langford adjusted the rearview mirror of his rented Lincoln Navigator, his eyes scanning the road with the practiced, almost subconscious vigilance of a man who had spent decades in federal law enforcement. He wasn't wearing the tactical vest or the windbreaker emblazoned with yellow letters that usually defined his presence. Tonight, Marcus wore a bespoke charcoal suit, the kind that cost more than a patrol car, though currently the jacket was folded neatly on the passenger seat. He was tired. The meeting regarding the rise in interstate trafficking had run long, and he simply wanted to get back to his temporary quarters. Marcus checked his speed. Perfectly legal, perfectly boring. Then the darkness of the rearview mirror exploded in blue and red strobes. Marcus sighed, the sound barely audible over the hum of the climate control. He didn't slam the brakes. He eased the Lincoln over to the shoulder, signaling clearly, bringing the heavy vehicle to a smooth stop beneath the pool of light from a highway lamp. He killed the engine, rolled down the window, and placed his large, steady hands at the 10 and 2 positions on the steering wheel. He waited. In the side mirror, he saw two figures approach. One stayed back near the patrol car's bumper, tactical position, hand resting on the holster. The other strutted forward, flashlight beam cutting through the drizzle, dancing aggressively over the Lincoln's interior. License and registration. The voice was flat, bored, yet laced with an undercurrent of hostility. Marcus didn't move his hands. He turned his head slowly to the left. The officer was young, with a buzz cut and a nameplate that read Kane. His eyes were hidden behind amber shooting glasses, ridiculous for a rainy night stop. "Officer," Marcus said, his voice a deep, resonant baritone that usually commanded boardrooms and briefing halls. "My wallet is in my suit jacket on the passenger seat. My registration is in the glove box. I'm going to reach for them now." "Don't get comfortable," Kane snapped, shining the light directly into Marcus's eyes. "Step out of the vehicle." Marcus paused. "Officer, I haven't committed a traffic violation. Is there a reason you're asking me to exit the vehicle?" "I smell alcohol," Kane lied. It was a reflex, a standard opener Marcus had seen in countless case files. "I haven't had a drink in years," Marcus replied calmly. "If you check the breathalyzer..." "I said get out of the car." Kane's hand dropped to the door handle, wrenching it open. "Now! Stop resisting." There was no resistance. Marcus unbuckled his seatbelt and stepped out, his tall frame rising to its full height. He towered over Kane, but his body language remained non-threatening. He knew the choreography of this dance better than the man leading it. The second officer, an older man with a thick mustache and stripes on his sleeve indicating the rank of sergeant, moved in. His nameplate read Reyes. "Nice ride," Reyes sneered, looking the Navigator up and down. "Rental?" "Yes," Marcus said. "Who rented it for you? The drug dealer you work for?" Reyes chuckled, a wet, phlegmy sound. Marcus looked at Reyes. He catalogued the face, pockmarked skin, burst capillaries on the nose from drinking, and a uniform that was tight around the gut. "I rented it myself, Sergeant. My identification..." "Turn around," Kane barked, spinning Marcus and slamming him against the wet metal of the Lincoln. "Hands behind your back. You are making a mistake." Marcus said as the cold metal of the handcuffs clicked around his wrists. My credentials are in my jacket pocket. If you look at them, we can resolve this. We know who you are. Kane laughed, tightening the cuffs until they bit into the skin. You're just another statistic, another guy in a suit trying to talk his way out of a stolen vehicle charge. Check the plates, Marcus said, his face pressed against the wet car. Run the name, Marcus T. Langford. Langford, Reyes laughed, leaning in close, his breath smelling of stale coffee and wintergreen tobacco. Like the president? Yeah, sure. And I'm Abraham Lincoln. Get him in the back, Kane. Let's see how much cash he's carrying. Maybe we can seize it for evidence. As they shoved him into the cramped, hard plastic back seat of the cruiser, Marcus didn't struggle. He watched them rifling through his Lincoln. He saw Reyes pick up his suit jacket. He saw the sergeant pull out the slim leather wallet. Marcus waited for the realization. He waited for Reyes to open the badge flap, to see the gold shield of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, to see the ID card that identified him as director with high security clearance. A man who reported directly to the Attorney General. Reyes opened the wallet. He looked at the cash, about $200. He smirked and pocketed the cash. Then he looked at the ID. He paused for a second. Marcus watched closely. Here it comes, he thought. The panic, the apology. But Reyes just laughed. He closed the wallet and tossed it onto the dashboard of the patrol car. What is it, Sarge? Kane asked, climbing into the driver's seat. Fake ID, Reyes said, grinning into the rearview mirror at Marcus. And a bad one at that. Says he's with the feds. Director, it says. Kane roared with laughter, slapping the steering wheel. Director, this guy? Look at him. He looks more like he directs traffic for a strip club. You are ignoring federal identification, Marcus said, his voice dropping an octave, losing the politeness. That is a felony. Officer Reyes, look at the holographic watermark. Call the number on the back. Shut up, Kane said, throwing the cruiser into gear. You can tell your fairy tales to the judge tonight. You're just another John Doe in the drunk tank. The cruiser peeled away, leaving the Lincoln Navigator abandoned on the side of the highway. Marcus sat in the dark, the cuffs cutting into his wrists. He closed his eyes and began to memorize. Car number, location, names, Kane and Reyes. They thought he was helpless. They had no idea. They had just arrested the man who signed the paychecks of the agents who investigated police departments for exactly this kind of behavior. The Oak Creek precinct was a relic, smelling of floor wax and misery. The fluorescent lights hummed with a headache-inducing flicker as Kane and Reyes marched Marcus through the back entrance. They didn't take him to a private interview room. They paraded him through the bullpen. Look what we caught, Kane announced to the room at large. 3 other officers looked up from their paperwork. He's the director of the FBI. Laughter rippled through the room. It was casual, practiced laughter, the sound of a fraternity mocking a pledge. Did you check his pockets for kryptonite too? One officer shouted. Nah, just found a fake badge and a lot of attitude, Reyes said, dropping Marcus's wallet onto the booking desk. He didn't log it, he just left it there. The booking officer, a heavy-set woman named Officer Baxter, didn't even look up at Marcus. Name, Marcus T. Langford, Marcus said clearly. I am demanding my one phone call immediately. I need to contact the Department of Justice. Baxter chewed her gum loudly. She looked at Reyes. He drunk? Refuse the breathalyzer, Kane said instantly. Another lie. They hadn't even offered it. Put him down as a refusal, Baxter typed slowly. Name John Doe. We'll ID him later when the system comes back up. It's down for maintenance. My name is not John Doe, Marcus said, stepping forward. Kane shoved him back. It is until we say it isn't, Kane hissed. Strip search. Marcus went cold. I am a federal official. You have no probable cause for a strip search. This is a violation of the Fourth Amendment and a direct assault on a federal officer policy. Reyes shrugged, leaning against the counter, picking his teeth. We got suspicion of narcotics. You were fidgety. That's probable cause in my book. Take him to the room, Kane. The humiliation was designed to break him. It was a power dynamic, pure and simple. In the small tiled room, Marcus did what he was told. He removed the bespoke suit. He stood naked while Kane made crude comments about his physique, checking him for contraband. Throughout it all, Marcus remained taut. He detached himself from the moment. He went to his mind palace, a technique he learned years ago. He wasn't a naked man in a dirty police station. He was a recording device. Every slur, every laugh, every violation of procedure was being burned into a mental hard drive that would soon be downloaded into a federal indictment. When they finally threw him his orange jumpsuit, it was 2 sizes too small. The pants rode up his calves. The shirt was tight across his chest. Fits perfect, Kane laughed. Fashion week in the cell block. They shoved him into holding cell number 4. It was a concrete box containing a steel toilet and a wooden bench. There were 3 other men inside. As the bars clanged shut, Reyes leaned close to the bars. Don't worry, Mr. Director, we'll send a pigeon to the president for you. The officers walked away, their laughter echoing down the concrete corridor. Marcus stood by the bars for a moment, listening until they were gone. Then he turned to face his cellmates. One was a young kid, maybe in his late teens, curled in the corner, shaking from withdrawal. The other 2 were older, hardened by the system. One of them, a man with a spiderweb tattoo on his neck, looked Marcus up and down. FBI director, huh? The tattooed man asked, cracking a knuckle. That's a new one. Usually guys claim they know a councilman. Marcus sat down on the edge of the bench, smoothing the orange fabric of his jumpsuit. His demeanor shifted. The stiffness left his shoulders. He looked the tattooed man in the eye, not with fear, but with an intensity that made the other man blink. I didn't claim to know one, Marcus said softly. I am one. So why are you in here with a suit? Research, Marcus lied, though it was becoming the truth. What are you in for? Walking while broke. The man spat. Reyes planted a baggie on me. Same old story. Who's going to believe me over a sergeant with years on the force? Marcus nodded slowly. Reyes, he does this often? Every shift, the man said. He and Kane, they got a quota, or maybe they just get off on it. They take your cash, book you as a John Doe so you can't make bail for hours, and by then you lose your job. It's a machine, man, and you just got chewed up. A machine? Marcus repeated. He looked at the graffiti scratched into the wall. God help us. Don't worry, Marcus said, a strange cold smile touching his lips for the first time that night. Machines can be dismantled. Sometimes you just need a big enough wrench. The tattooed man laughed, but he shifted uneasily. There was something about this new guy. He didn't smell like fear. He smelled like ozone before a lightning strike. Hours bled into one another. The holding cell smelled of urine and despair. Marcus sat upright, back straight against the cold cinder block, meditating. He needed to keep his heart rate low, his mind sharp. During the shift change, Marcus approached the bars as a new officer walked by. Officer, Marcus called out. The guard, a tired-looking man named Daniels, paused. Quiet down. My name is Marcus Langford. I have a medical condition. Marcus lied effortlessly. I need my medication from my personal effects. It's in the wallet Sergeant Reyes confiscated. Daniels sighed. If you make me go back there and there ain't no pills, you're going to solitary. Check the wallet, please. Daniels grumbled but walked off. Marcus waited. He didn't need pills. He needed Daniels to look at the wallet. Reyes and Kane were arrogant. They likely hadn't destroyed the ID yet, probably planning to keep it as a trophy or toss it in the dumpster at the end of the shift. Minutes passed. Daniels came back. He wasn't walking with the slow shuffle of a tired guard anymore. He was walking fast. His face was pale. He held a piece of plastic in his hand as if it were radioactive. He stopped at the bars, his hands trembling slightly. "Sir," Daniels whispered, "the ID." "Good morning, Officer Daniels," Marcus said pleasantly. "Did you find the medication?" I found this." Daniels held up the FBI credentials. This is real. The holographic seal. It's the new series." "It is," Marcus said. "And I assume you know what the penalty is for kidnapping a federal official, holding him without charge, and denying him counsel." Daniels swallowed hard. Sweat beaded on his forehead. I just came on shift. I didn't book you." "I know," Marcus said. "That is why you are going to help yourself, Daniels. You are going to open this gate. You are going to give me a phone. And you are going to say absolutely nothing to Reyes or Kane. Do we have an understanding?" Daniels fumbled with the keys. He dropped them once, the clatter echoing loudly. He picked them up, jamming the key into the lock. The gate swung open. "The phone is at the desk," Daniels whispered. "But the captain comes in early if he sees you." "I want him to see me," Marcus said, stepping out of the cell. He towered over Daniels. "But not yet. Lock the gate." "What?" "Lock it. I'm not leaving yet. I need to make a call, and then I'm going back inside." Daniels looked at him like he was insane. You want to go back in?" "The crime isn't finished yet, officer," Marcus said, his eyes hard as flint. "And neither is the evidence collection. Give me the phone." Marcus stood at the booking desk, the precinct quiet in the pre-dawn lull. He dialed a number from memory, a secure line to the Strategic Information and Operations Center at FBI headquarters. "This is Director Langford," Marcus said into the receiver. "Authorization code Delta 9 Zulu King. Initiate protocol clean sweep." He listened for a moment. "Yes, I am currently incarcerated at the Oak Creek Police Department. No, do not send the hostage rescue team yet. I want the Attorney General involved. I want the Civil Rights Division. And get me the special agent in charge of the Norfolk field office. I want a convoy here at first light, not a minute sooner. I want them to arraign me first." Marcus paused, listening to the shocked silence on the other end. "Yes, you heard me. Let them drag me into court in cuffs. I want it on the record. I want the judge to say it loud enough for the court reporter to type it. I want the noose so tight around this department's neck that they hang themselves before they realize the floor is gone." He hung up the phone. He looked at Daniels, who was cowering in the corner. "Thank you, officer. Now put me back in the cage." Marcus walked back into the cell, the orange jumpsuit scratching his skin. He sat back down on the bench next to the sleeping kid. The tattooed man was awake. He looked at Marcus with wide eyes. "Who are you?" Marcus closed his eyes, resting his head against the wall. "I'm the karma you were talking about." Morning arrived with the harsh clang of metal doors and the screaming of names. "Doe, front and center." It was Reyes again. He looked fresh, a coffee cup in his hand, a cruel smirk on his face. He had no idea that while he slept, the machinery of the United States Department of Justice had begun to spin up like a turbine engine. Marcus stood up. He was handcuffed again, chained to 3 other prisoners. They were marched out of the precinct and into a transport van. The drive to the courthouse was short. The prisoners were unloaded into the basement holding area of the Oak Creek County Courthouse. The smell here was even worse. Fear and stale smoke. Marcus was assigned a public defender, a harried man named Mr. Klein, who didn't even look up from his file when Marcus sat opposite him in the interview booth. "All right, John Doe," Klein sighed, rubbing his temples. "They got you for resisting, failure to identify, and suspicion of DUI. The breathalyzer was a refusal. So that's automatic license suspension. Prosecutor is asking for bail. I am not John Doe," Marcus said. "My name is Marcus Langford." "Yeah, Look, don't start with the fake names. It pisses the judge off. Judge Harlan, he's the brother of the booking officer, by the way. Nice little family business they got. He doesn't like games. I'm sure he doesn't, Marcus said. Mr. Klein, I do not want a plea deal. I want to go before the judge immediately. You're going to get crushed, Klein warned. Just plead no contest to the obstruction. They drop the DUI. You do time served and pay a fine. No, Marcus said. Klein threw his hands up. Fine, it's your funeral, but don't say I didn't warn you. The courtroom was packed. It was a conveyor belt of misery, mainly poor, mainly minorities, all being processed in minutes by a system designed to extract fines and pleas. Judge Lawrence Harlan sat on the bench like a king on a throne. He was a heavy man with a face like a bulldog. He rubber-stamped every motion. The prosecutor, a sharp-featured woman named Ms. Archer, made the case. Case number 4492, the state versus John Doe. Marcus was led to the podium. Kane and Reyes stood in the back, leaning against the wall, smirking. They had come to watch the show. Mr. Doe, Judge Harlan boomed. You are charged with obstruction of justice, resisting arrest, and driving under the influence. How do you plead? Marcus leaned into the microphone. The handcuffs clinked against the wood. My name, Marcus said, his voice filling the room, is Marcus T. Langford, and I plead not guilty. The officer's report says you refuse to identify, Ms. Archer shot back, and that you presented a fake federal ID. It was not fake, Marcus said calmly. Judge Harlan scoffed. Mr. Doe, do not waste my time. Officer Reyes is a decorated veteran of this force. If he says the ID was fake, it was fake. I am setting bail at $10,000 and holding you in contempt for this charade. You might want to check the docket, Your Honor, Marcus said. Excuse me? Harlan's face turned red. I said check the docket, or perhaps look out the window. At that exact moment, a low rumble began to vibrate through the floorboards of the old courthouse. It wasn't thunder. It was the sound of heavy engines, many of them. Reyes frowned and turned to look out the window at the back of the courtroom. His smirk vanished. What is that? Someone whispered. The doors at the back of the courtroom burst open. It wasn't a bailiff. 6 men in full tactical gear with FBI emblazoned in bright yellow on their chests flooded the room. They fanned out with military precision, weapons at the low ready. Behind them walked a woman in a sharp navy suit. She was the special agent in charge of the Norfolk field office, Agent Elena Voss. The courtroom went deadly silent. Judge Harlan froze, his gavel half raised. What is the meaning of this? Harlan shouted, though his voice wavered. This is my courtroom. Elena Voss ignored him. She walked straight to the podium, flanked by 2 agents. She looked at Marcus, who was standing in his orange jumpsuit and handcuffs. She turned to the bailiff. Unlock him now. I can't without the judge's order, the bailiff stammered. That wasn't a request, Voss said. And that man isn't a defendant. He is the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum that sucked the air out of the room. Reyes dropped his coffee cup. It shattered, the brown liquid pooling on the floor, but no one looked at it. Every eye was on the man in the orange jumpsuit. Marcus waited as the bailiff's hands, shaking violently, unlocked the cuffs. Marcus rubbed his wrists. He turned slowly to face the back of the room, locking eyes with Reyes and Kane. Kane looked like he was going to vomit. Reyes was pale, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. Marcus turned back to the judge. Judge Harlan, Marcus said, you mentioned Officer Reyes is a decorated veteran. I'm afraid his decoration period is over and yours is just beginning. Marcus turned to Agent Voss. Secure the building. No one leaves. Seize all records. Arrest Officer Kane, Sergeant Reyes, and Judge Harlan. On what grounds? Harlan shrieked, standing up. RICO predicate acts, Marcus said calmly. Conspiracy to deprive civil rights, kidnapping, and wire fraud. We've been monitoring this precinct's financial irregularities for months. I just came to test the customer service. Marcus walked toward the exit. As he passed Reyes, the sergeant was being slammed against the wall by two agents, cuffs clicking onto his wrists. Marcus paused. He leaned in close to Reyes's ear. "You were right, Sergeant," Marcus whispered. "You did send a pigeon to the president, but the eagle came back." The interrogation room at the FBI field office in Norfolk was everything the Oak Creek precinct was not. It was soundproofed, climate-controlled, and sterile. The table was polished steel bolted to the floor. The mirror on the wall was one-way glass behind which stood federal prosecutors and senior agents. Sergeant Reyes sat on the metal chair. He was no longer the strutting rooster of the highway stop. His mustache drooped, wet with sweat. His hands were cuffed in front of him, fidgeting nervously with the table edge. He had been sitting there for hours alone. No one had spoken to him. The silence was a calculated instrument of torture. Then the heavy door clicked and swung open. Marcus T. Langford walked in. He was no longer in the orange jumpsuit. He wore a navy blue bespoke suit, a crisp white shirt, and a silk tie that shimmered under the fluorescent lights. On his lapel was a small gold pin of the FBI seal. He carried a thick file folder. Marcus didn't sit. He placed the file on the table and walked to the corner of the room, leaning against the wall, crossing his arms. He looked at Reyes with a calm, surgical detachment. Special agent in charge, Elena Voss, followed him in. She sat opposite Reyes. "You have the right to remain silent," Voss began, her voice crisp. "I know my rights," Reyes croaked. His voice was hoarse. "I want a lawyer. I want the union rep." "The union rep isn't coming, Sergeant," Marcus spoke up from the corner. His deep voice filled the small room. "The union is currently being served with a subpoena for their pension fund records. It seems there have been some unusual deposits matching the seizure logs from your traffic stops." Reyes's head snapped toward Marcus. You set me up! This is entrapment!" Marcus laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. He walked to the table and opened the file. He pulled out a photo, a grainy still from the dashboard camera of Reyes's own cruiser. "Entrapment implies I coerced you into committing a crime you wouldn't have otherwise committed," Marcus said. "Did I force you to pull over a vehicle doing the speed limit? Did I force you to lie about the smell of alcohol? Did I force you to steal $200 from my wallet?" "I didn't steal. We found the marked bills in your locker," Voss cut in. "The serial numbers were recorded before Director Langford even left D.C. You walked right into a buzzsaw." Reyes slumped. "Look, it was a mistake. We see a luxury car late at night. You get jumpy. We're on the front lines here. We're protecting the community." "Protecting?" Marcus leaned over the table, his face inches from Reyes's. "You aren't protecting anything but your own wallet. We've been watching Oak Creek for months. We know about the arrangement with Miller's towing. You impound the cars, Miller charges exorbitant fees. The people can't pay. Miller sells the cars at auction and you get a kickback. We know about the administrative fees Judge Harlan adds to every bail hearing." Reyes went pale. I don't know what you're talking about." "We have Kane," Voss said softly. "He's in the next room, and unlike you, he's young. He's scared. He's looking at 20 years federal time. He's singing, Reyes. He's telling us everything to save his own skin. He said the John Doe scheme was your idea. Keep them in the system for hours so they lose their jobs, making them desperate enough to take a plea deal just to get out." Marcus tapped the file. "But here is the twist, Sergeant, the part you didn't see coming." Marcus pulled out a document. It was a bank statement. "We froze your offshore accounts in the Caymans this morning," Marcus said. "Over $1 million on a sergeant's salary. The IRS is very interested, but that's not the worst part for you. Marcus walked back to the door. He turned, hand on the handle. The worst part is that we didn't just arrest you in Harlan. We picked up the local cartel distributor an hour ago. A man named Vargas. Turns out the reason you pull over innocent people isn't just for money, it's to clear the road for Vargas's trucks. You shut down traffic, stopping suspects so his runners can slip by unnoticed. Reyes's eyes bulged. The air left his lungs. No, that's not... Vargas thinks you ratted him out to save yourself. Marcus lied smoothly. We put you and him in the same holding block downstairs. I imagine he's very eager to talk to you. You can't do that! Reyes screamed, standing up, rattling the cuffs. He'll kill me! You have to put me in protective custody! Protective custody is for cooperators, Marcus said, cold as ice. Right now, you're just a suspect refusing to talk. I'll talk, Reyes yelled, tears streaming down his face. I'll tell you everything, Harlan. The mayor, the towing company, I'll give you the whole damn list. Just don't put me in with Vargas. Marcus looked at Agent Voss. She nodded slightly. Sit down, Reyes, Marcus said. Start talking, and if you lie even once, I will personally escort you back to that cell. Marcus walked out of the room. As the door closed, he heard Reyes sobbing, spilling secrets that would tear the corrupt foundation of the city apart. Marcus adjusted his cuffs. He walked down the hallway to the observation room where Kane was being held. He watched through the glass. The young officer was sitting with his head in his hands. What about him, sir? An agent asked Marcus. He's young, Marcus said. But he held the flashlight while the other man robbed the house. He doesn't get a pass. Process him to the full extent. Marcus checked his watch. He had a press conference soon. The governor was flying in. The media was already swarming the building. But there was one more stop he had to make. He needed to visit the one person in Oak Creek who had actually tried to do the right thing. Get the car, Marcus said to his detail. We're going back to the precinct. The return to Oak Creek was nothing like the arrival. Hours earlier, Marcus T. Langford had been a solitary figure in a rental car enveloped by rain and darkness, vulnerable to the whims of two men with badges. Today he returned as the tip of a spear. A convoy of black Suburbans swept into the precinct parking lot. There were no sirens, no flashing lights, and no theatrics. The vehicles moved with the heavy, undeniable momentum of the federal government. They cut through the afternoon haze, their tires crunching over the gravel where Reyes's patrol car had sat the night before. Inside the precinct, the atmosphere was one of suffocating dread. The raid was already well underway. The lobby, usually a place of boredom and slow-moving bureaucracy, had been transformed into a zone of controlled chaos. Agents wearing Navy windbreakers emblazoned with FBI in bold yellow letters moved with military precision. They were everywhere, carrying bankers' boxes filled with files, imaging hard drives, and tagging evidence bags. Marcus stepped out of the lead SUV. He buttoned his jacket, his movements calm and deliberate. The perimeter was already secured by uniformed state troopers who had been called in to assist, keeping a massive crowd of reporters and curious locals behind yellow tape. Marcus ignored the shouting voices and the shutter clicks of cameras. He walked straight through the double glass doors. The air inside smelled of stale coffee and panic. Marcus walked through the bullpen. The silence that fell upon the room was absolute. Uniformed Oak Creek officers stood in clusters near the walls, stripped of their weapons, watching their workspace being dissected. They looked like children who had been caught playing with matches while the house burned down. They had watched their captain and sergeant dragged out in irons earlier that morning. Now they were watching the autopsy of their careers. Marcus moved past the empty front desk. Officer Baxter was gone, her chair pushed back as if she had left in a hurry. She was currently in an interrogation room 3 towns over, explaining why the booking logs had been digitally altered hundreds of times in the last year. Marcus didn't stop until he reached the back of the room near the corridor that led to the holding cells. Officer Daniels sat alone at a small battered metal desk. He was isolated, a pariah in his own house. The other officers glared at him with undisguised hatred, the word traitor hanging unspoken in the air. Daniels was staring into a styrofoam cup of cold coffee. His shoulders slumped, looking like a man waiting for the executioner. He sensed a presence and looked up. When he saw the director of the FBI standing over him, panic flared in his eyes. He started to scramble to his feet. "Sit down, officer," Marcus said, his voice quiet but commanding. Daniels sank back into the chair, the springs creaking. "Director, sir, I didn't know if you were coming back. I told you the crime wasn't finished," Marcus said. He looked around the room, noting the hostile glares from the other officers, then looked back at Daniels. "You opened the gate, you made the call. In a building full of wolves, you decided to be a sheepdog. That carries a cost. They're going to hate me forever," Daniels whispered, his voice trembling. "I'm a rat to them. I'll never work in law enforcement again. My career is dead." "Your career in Oak Creek is dead," Marcus corrected. "But Oak Creek is dead too." Marcus reached into his suit pocket and produced a business card. It wasn't the standard card. It was heavy cream-colored cardstock with the Department of Justice seal embossed in gold leaf. "This department is being dissolved," Marcus said, ensuring his voice carried just enough for the nearby agents to hear. "The county sheriff is taking over jurisdiction effective immediately. But the Bureau needs people who know the difference between loyalty to a badge and loyalty to the law. It is a hard test to pass. Most of the men in this room failed it. You didn't." Daniels took the card, his fingers brushing against the embossed seal. He stared at it as if it were a winning lottery ticket. "On the back is a direct line," Marcus continued. "Call it on Monday. We have a position opening in the Internal Affairs Division. We need people who know exactly what corruption smells like from the inside. We need people who know how hard it is to turn that key." "Thank you, sir," Daniels managed to choke out. Tears pricked the corners of his eyes, but he held them back. Marcus nodded once, then turned on his heel to face the room. He walked to the center of the bullpen. The FBI agents paused in their work. The Oak Creek officers stiffened. "Listen up!" Marcus's voice boomed, filling the cavernous room. The silence stretched heavy and electric. "Some of you are wondering if you're next," Marcus said, making eye contact with a burly officer who quickly looked at the floor. "You're wondering if we're going to check your text messages, if we're going to audit your bank accounts, if we're going to talk to the victims you intimidated." He paused, letting the fear marinate. "The answer is yes. We will find every dollar. We will read every text. We will undo every lie. If you took a bribe, if you planted evidence, if you looked the other way while Reyes and Kane terrorized this highway, pack your bags. We are coming for you." Marcus took a step forward, his gaze sweeping the room. "But if you just did your job, if you kept your head down because you were afraid of the tyrants running this place, then you have a choice to make today. You can help us clean this mess up, or you can turn in your badge and walk out. Because from this day forward, Oak Creek is no longer a safe haven for bullies. It is a closed shop." He didn't wait for a response. He didn't need one. The fear in their eyes was answer enough. He turned and walked back toward the exit, the sea of agents parting for him. He had broken the spine of the corruption. Now the scavengers would pick the bones clean. The press conference was set up on the concrete steps of the precinct, not the courthouse. Marcus wanted the backdrop of the crime scene. The sun had finally broken through the overcast sky, casting a stark, revealing light on the podium. Marcus stood before a forest of microphones. To his right stood the governor, looking grave. To his left, the attorney general. Director Langford, a reporter from CNN shouted from the front row. Is it true that you were strip-searched? Is it true you were placed in a general population cell with violent offenders? Marcus leaned into the microphones. The cameras clicked furiously, a wall of white noise. What happened to me? Marcus said, his voice calm, resonant, and devoid of self-pity. Is not the story. I am a man with power. I have resources, I have a security detail and a phone number that rings in the White House. I can defend myself. He paused, looking directly into the lens of the main camera. The story is not about what they did to the FBI director. The story is about what they did to the nurse driving home from a double shift who couldn't afford the bail. What they did to the college student heading back to school who had his scholarship revoked because of a falsified DUI. What they did to the mechanic who lost his livelihood because he couldn't pay the extortionate impound fees. But the humiliation, sir, another reporter pressed. Officer Kane and Sergeant Reyes laughed at me, Marcus said, a grim smile touching his lips. They thought I was a joke. They thought the Constitution was a suggestion they could ignore if the night was dark enough. Today we are reminding them and every officer like them across this country that the law is not a tool for the strong to prey on the weak. It is a shield for the weak to stand against the strong. What about Judge Harlan? Asked a journalist from the local paper. Judge Harlan, Marcus said, his voice hardening, is currently explaining to a federal magistrate why he owns 3 vacation homes on a civil servant's salary. I suspect he will find the bail hearing enlightening. He set the prices for freedom in this county for years. Now he gets to see what it costs. Marcus stepped back from the podium. He didn't want the glory. He wanted the result. As he walked down the steps toward the waiting SUVs, Special Agent in charge Elena Voss fell in beside him. She was holding a tablet, scrolling through data. We got the forensic download from Reyes's phone, she said quietly, keeping her voice below the roar of the crowd. It's worse than we thought. He texted a contact at the towing company minutes after he arrested you. The text read, "Got a big one. Lincoln Navigator, pristine condition, prep for auction." Marcus stopped walking. He looked at the ground, shaking his head slowly. They were going to sell it before I was even convicted. They didn't even care about the court date. It was just theft. Greed makes people stupid, Voss said. And there's something else. Vargas, the cartel distributor we picked up, he's singing soprano. He says Harlan wasn't just taking bribes. He was laundering money through the court system. Fake fines paid by shell companies channeled right into Harlan's pockets. It's a massive operation, sir. We're talking tens of millions. Marcus looked up at the skyline of the small, sleepy town. It looked so normal, yet it had been rotting from the inside out. Then this wasn't just a bad traffic stop, Marcus said softly. This was a thread and we just pulled the whole sweater apart. What do you want to do about the Lincoln? Voss asked, glancing at the impound lot manifest on her screen. It's still sitting in Miller's lot. We can have it released to you immediately. Marcus checked his watch. He thought about the arrogance of the towing company owner, a man who profited from the misery of others. No, Marcus said. Leave it there for one more day. I want Mr. Miller to explain to a federal jury why he has the FBI director's rental car listed on his to-be-sold manifest without a court order. It's the final piece of evidence we need to seize his entire business under RICO statutes. Ruthless, Voss said, a small appreciative smile crossing her face. Justice, Marcus corrected. He opened the car door, the weight of the ordeal finally settling in his bones. Now get me a coffee, a real one. The stuff in that cell was terrible, and the stuff on Daniel's desk looked even worse. Months had passed since the raid, but the ripples of the Oak Creek scandal were still widening. What had begun as a traffic stop on a rainy highway had exploded into a national referendum on police corruption. The story had dominated headlines, sparked documentaries, and launched investigations into neighboring counties. But today, the noise of the media circus would finally be silenced by the gavel of federal justice. The federal courthouse in Richmond was more than just full. It was suffocating. The air inside the main courtroom was thick with tension, and the smell of old wood and wool suits. Every bench was occupied. Victims of the Oak Creek scheme sat shoulder to shoulder with journalists, their eyes fixed on the front of the room. They weren't just there for a verdict. They were there for catharsis. Marcus T. Langford sat in the back row of the gallery. He wore a simple gray suit, blending into the shadows of the heavy oak pillars. He didn't need to be here. His testimony had been given months ago. His part of the machinery concluded, but he felt a solemn obligation to see the final cog turn. He wasn't here to celebrate, he was here to witness. In the defendant's chair sat the remnants of the Oak Creek Empire. Former Judge Lawrence Harlan, once the tyrant of the county bench, looked like a man whose skeleton had been removed. The expensive suits were gone, replaced by a drab court appearance outfit that hung loosely on his frame. His bulldog face, once red with shouted commands, was now gray and slack. He stared at the table, refusing to look at the gallery where dozens of people he had defrauded were whispering. Beside him sat Patrick Reyes. The transformation was even more stark. The thick, arrogant mustache was gone, shaved off to reveal a weak, trembling upper lip. He had aged a decade in months. His eyes darted around the room like a trapped animal, seeking a friendly face and finding only judgment. Officer Kane wasn't at the defense table. He had taken a plea deal early, turning state's evidence to save his own future. His testimony had been the nail in the coffin, detailing every bribe, every planted bag of narcotics, and every rigged bail hearing. He had already been processed to 5 years in a minimum security facility. He was the lucky one. All rise. The bailiff's voice cut through the murmurs like a blade. The room stood as one. The silence that followed was heavy, pressing down on the lungs. The federal judge, a stern woman with a reputation for zero tolerance regarding public corruption, took the bench. She didn't look at the papers in front of her. She looked directly at the men standing before the bar. "Lawrence Harlan," she began, her voice echoing off the high ceilings. "You were entrusted with the most sacred duty of our society, the impartial administration of justice. Instead, you turned your courtroom into an auction block." Harlan flinched as if struck. "On the charges of racketeering, conspiracy to defraud the United States, and money laundering, this court finds you guilty. On the charge of deprivation of rights under color of law, guilty." The gavel came down. Bang! It was a final, irrevocable sound. "You have disgraced the robe you wore," the judge continued, her eyes hard as flint. "You stripped citizens of their freedom for profit. I sentence you to 30 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole." A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. 30 years. For a man of Harlan's age, it was a death sentence. He would die in a cage, just like the ones he had so casually filled with innocent people. He slumped into his chair, burying his face in his hands. "Stand up, Mr. Reyes," the judge commanded. Reyes struggled to his feet. His legs were shaking so violently the movement was visible even from the back row. "Sergeant Patrick Reyes," she said, reading from the ledger of his sins. "You were the enforcer. You used the authority of the badge not to protect, but to prey. You bullied, you lied, and you stole. You destroyed lives for pocket change. Reyes began to weep, a pathetic hiccuping sound that grated on the nerves. I sentence you to 25 years. Reyes's knees buckled. Two U.S. Marshals stepped in immediately, gripping him by the arms to keep him upright. As they prepared to drag him away, Reyes looked up, his eyes wide with terror, scanning the room, desperate for salvation. He locked eyes with Marcus in the back row. Time seemed to freeze. In that split second, Reyes wasn't seeing a spectator. He was seeing the rainy highway, the blue lights, and the man he had laughed at. He was remembering his own taunt about sending a pigeon to the president. Marcus didn't smile. He didn't nod. He simply held the gaze, his expression unreadable, calm, and terrifyingly final. It was the look of a balance sheet that had been zeroed out. The transaction is complete. Reyes looked away, shame burning his face, and let out a sob as the marshals dragged him through the side door. The heavy door clicked shut, sealing their fate. Marcus stood up slowly. He adjusted his jacket, turned, and walked out of the courtroom. He didn't stop to talk to the reporters swarming the hallway. He pushed through the heavy double doors and stepped out into the bright afternoon sunlight of Richmond. The air smelled different here, clean, crisp, free of the stale scent of fear. He walked down the marble steps to the waiting black government sedan. Leaning against the hood was Special Agent Daniels. The young man looked sharp in a fitted suit, though he still carried himself with a hint of nervous energy. He straightened up as Marcus approached. "Did they get what they deserved, sir?" Daniels asked, opening the rear door. Marcus paused, hand on the roof of the car. He looked back at the courthouse, standing tall against the blue sky. "They got the law, Daniels," Marcus said quietly, "which is more than they gave anyone else. Where to now, Director?" "Back to D.C." Marcus slid into the back seat, checking the map on his phone. A notification had popped up earlier. A small town in rural Alabama where the sheriff was reportedly seizing cash from out-of-state drivers under dubious asset forfeiture laws. It was the same pattern, the same arrogance. Marcus smiled, a glint of the old hunter returning to his eyes. "Alabama," Marcus said. "I feel like taking a drive. Maybe we rent a car when we get there. See what happens." Daniels grinned, sliding into the driver's seat and starting the engine. "I'll make the reservation, sir." "Convertible? Let's not push our luck." Marcus chuckled, buckling his seatbelt. "Just a sedan, a nice boring sedan." He looked out the window as the car pulled into traffic. "And Daniels, sir, make sure the tail light is out," Marcus said softly. "Just a little bit." The sedan merged onto the highway, disappearing into the flow of traffic. Just another car on the road with a passenger who was ready to teach the world that sometimes the easiest targets bite back the hardest. And that is how the hunters became the hunted. Marcus Langford didn't just survive the night. He turned a moment of humiliation into a sledgehammer of justice that shattered a corrupt empire. It's a powerful reminder. Never judge a book by its cover, and never ever assume that the person you're bullying doesn't have the power to destroy you. If you enjoyed this story of high-stakes karma and justice served cold, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you never miss a story. Share this with someone who needs to see the bad guys get what's coming to them.